Hi everyone, my name is Mia Jan. Welcome to my channel and welcome to yet another video where I talk about my ESL teaching journey in South Korea. I will tell you everything that happened for the past 7 years. My journey started back in 2017. And I have really cool tips for you on how to survive these jobs, how to navigate your bosses, the kids and everything like that. You'll find out how to get these jobs. There are tips there as well, how much they pay, and overall navigating a life in a foreign country. So as I said, I have 7 years of teaching experience abroad under my belt. So go ahead and listen carefully and listen to the very end. So the year was 2016. I graduated at the end of 2016 with a major in biochemistry from UCLA. And then in 2017, I started working for a K-pop outlet company in Koreatown. So back in April of 2017, I actually got an offer from CDI Learning to be their ESL teacher and come to their location was in Seoul, South Korea. So I was super excited to start my journey toward being a teacher, toward living in South Korea, and toward my favorite group, BTS. So the way I actually got this job was through a recruiter. The way you get this job really kind of effectively is by using a recruiter. So the company that I use is called Corvia. What you can do is use several recruiters to make this, speed this up and interview with a lot of schools. So try going through Corvia. I'm not sponsored by them. And there's also other companies like Teach English Abroad. Go ahead and just type it online and a bunch of recruiters will come up for you. You can also use Seoul Craigslist because they post a lot of jobs, like the recruiters there are roaming around, and just contact them and then you'll get the messages. And yeah, that's how you do it. Make sure you go on the Seoul Craigslist and use a recruiter because they'll help you from beginning to end, just with everything. You also have two options whether to apply and get the public school position. So you would be teaching at public schools, and that's called EPIC. Or you can go the private school path and teach at English Academy. So go ahead and choose what you like to do. A lot of people like going the public school route because the jobs are more secure. However, what you do need to get is 2 letters of recommendation. So go ahead, and if you find 2 people that can give you really good letters of recommendation, you can go through the public school route. But what I did the private school thing because I kind of didn't want to bother I have to find like professors or like my former employees. I have to contact them. Back then ChatGPT wasn't a thing, so I wasn't I'd have to have them type everything out, or find a counselor or something. So I just decided to do the private sector and go through them. And that's not a bad idea because there's a lot of academies available, so a lot of jobs available in that sector. Now, the document process is really long and arduous and takes about 2 months at a minimum. So you're going to have to prepare for that, and it's actually going to cost about $350 or more. So be prepared for that. But yeah, I went through this process. And what else? You have to be from one of the 7 English-speaking countries, have a 4-year bachelor's degree, and get a clean background check. So you can't do like any crimes or anything like that. They're also going to do a health check, so you can't be consuming any sort of substances, so your health record needs to come up clean as well. So those are requirements to teach English in Korea. I actually made a separate video about the exact documenting process, everything that you need to prepare from A to Z, so go ahead and check out that video right here. So my first tip is, when you're thinking of teaching in South Korea and after you contact these recruiters, start thinking about your priorities. What is the most important thing to you? Here are the 3 categories that I'm gonna call out. So number 1 is location. Do you want to be in the Seoul or the surrounding Gyeonggi-do area, or are you okay with being in other locations, even Jeju Island or like Daejeon or Busan or something like that, or somewhere in the countryside? Are you okay with those locations as well? What is your location preference? Is that the main thing for you? Number 2 is the pay. As a starting teacher, try to negotiate at least 2.4 million for your first salary. That's going to be important. I mean, if you want to go lower, you can, but honestly, 2.4 is already kind of the base pay already. So try to negotiate for that. Number 3 is the grade of students. Now, do you want to teach at a kindergarten? There, the hours would be 9 to 6 p.m. So you'd be working morning to evening. Or do you want to work with older kids? But then those hours are going to be different, 1 to 9 p.m. There are other schools that do like 2 to 10 p.m. So those are the after school programs. So it's up to you to decide. Is it location? Is it the pay? Or is it the hours? So if you tell them your preference, your recruiter will try to match your preference, and then he'll make that a priority, and then you're going to get what you want. And like I said, in order to get this job, you're going to have to invest up front. So like I said, it's going to be about $350 or more for all the documenting process and all the shipping stuff, and more on that in this video. But yeah, if you're poor, you really can't do this. You have to earn a little bit of money before you start coming to Korea. So keep that in mind. I also mentioned that this process usually takes about 2 months. If you want to expedite this process, you're going to have to pay a little bit more and go through specific channelers and especially other agencies. So yeah, be aware of that. It is a very long taking process, and if you want to expedite it, make sure to use specific channelers. You're going to have to pay more for that. Like I said, I did already make a video on this, but something that I haven't seen online that much that has been emphasized enough, I want to help you guys expedite this process and make it as cheap as possible. So here are the 2 things that I don't really see mentioned that much, and in order to get this done. So first of all is when you get your fingerprints, don't do the fingerprint card, but actually go to a designated USPS location in order to get digital fingerprints done. Now this FBI approved USPS location will allow you to get digital fingerprints done, and the results for the FBI background check only comes out in 1 day. Now if you use the fingerprint card plus mailing option, that's going to take several months. It's absolutely crazy. Compared to the digital USPS option, that's only going to take a day. So I thought that was a very big difference that should be mentioned. And then the second thing is that when you get the FBI background check results over mail as a PDF, use a channeler company like Monument Visa to get the results apostilled, and that's only going to take 10 days if you use the rush version, because otherwise if you don't use a channeler, that's also going to take several months. But if you do use the rush version for the channeler, I recommend Monument Visa. I'm not sponsored by them, but if you do, then that process is only going to take 10 days to 2 weeks. Actually, for me, I was a little bit kind of miffed that they're going to take 2 weeks to process this, but that's still a shorter time frame than the month that you would do without the rush version. Or if you did it by yourself, that would take over like 6 weeks. So something crazy like that. Now this expedited service is more expensive, like I mentioned, so it's going to be $120 with shipping. There is a link below to get the discounted price. Actually, I'm not sponsored, like I said, but I'm just pointing you out to like a link for the cheaper version there. Be sure to check out my video on all the documentation there. Third time I'm mentioning it. But yeah, so some recruiters actually won't even consider you until all of your apostille documentation is ready because of how long everything takes. So go ahead and start on the apostilling process as soon as possible if you're interested in this journey. However, once it is ready, you'll get multiple offers for interviews with many schools, and eventually you are going to get a position there by interviewing with several schools. Anyways, I'm going to tell you guys about my journey. Back in 2017, when I was still young and fresh, I went through the entirety of the process, and that turned out great because a well-known chain called Changdam Learning ended up hiring me, and I was over the moon. Though I was sad to say goodbye to my LA friends and my job. They were going to pay me 3.0 million without the housing. So 3.0 million, which is like $2,700. I got a ticket for May 2017 and started my journey to Korea. The wonderful thing was that my friend decided to spend 3 months in Seoul with me, so I was less lonely my first few months thanks to my dear friend Ha. So one really weird thing that happened was originally I was placed in the CDI headquarters, but suddenly during the process, they switched my location to another Seoul location. I won't reveal exactly what location it was, but that was kind of a weird moment. But hey, I thought it's still Seoul, so that should still be okay, right? So kind of a weird moment there, but they do end up switching things last minute. That is kind of a common thing that ends up happening because things move so fast in South Korea. So once I arrived to South Korea, I bought my ticket, I arrived, I underwent 1 week of training. They actually placed me in a hotel in Gangnam and their training location was in Chamshir. So I underwent training with the other teachers there. And a tip is when you do the health check, make sure your medical record comes up completely clean. So don't declare any illnesses and under no circumstances take and bring recreational drugs with you. Your teaching visa will be revoked and you might even be deported. So that's a really big point there. So they got us a hotel in the center of Gangnam, so we experienced a lot of the beauties of Korea that first unforgettable week. It was an incredible week, just, immersing yourself into that culture. And some highlights being the cool restaurants, the busy streets, the Han River, the subway, Korean fried chicken, which tasted amazing, banana milk, same, and then convenience stores, the cool clothing stores, etc. So it was a complete cultural shock. It was really quite an amazing experience while we underwent training in the center of Seoul, South Korea. So the first thing that I did on that first morning of waking up in the Gangnam hotel that they provided for us was wake up at like 9 a.m. and actually I went and visited the old Big Hit building in Hakdong. Back in 2017, it was BTS's original building where they debuted with all the writings on the wall and such. So it was really cool to see that stuff. I was that big of a fan. So on my very first day, I knew where to go and it was there. So unfortunately for me, but maybe fortunately for them, nobody was there and nobody came out of the building when I visited. So still an incredible experience for me, especially actually rather than the building. It was waking up that morning that was really kind of memorable because when I was walking through that street the previous night, there were just so many people on the street. But then when I woke up at 9 a.m. and went out on the street, the streets were completely empty. So I was wondering where all the people of Gangnam went because it was so packed the evening before. Koreans must not wake up that early, which was 9 a.m. was my primary thought at that time. But more on my BTS journey in a separate video here. So my school actually helped me find a little office tel in Gangnam, and it was about 750,000 won, just a side note. And then but they provided the key money, so that was nice. And actually my first few months there, I was just so distracted by the Gangnam lights, by all the shopping and by all the activities, mostly the incredible amounts of shopping that I did, that I may have actually made a bit of a negative impression on my bosses because what happened was my first teaching job, they actually let me go on my 3rd month of teaching there. They gave me a 2-week notice and now I had a huge problem on my hands. I had to find another job and quickly, otherwise I would lose my E2 visa status and I would have to come back to the US. So I was just scrambling, trying to find another job, and guess what? Thankfully, thank the Lord, I was able to find another job. This was about August of 2017. It was a location in Pundang, so it was on the red line there, so also actually really close to Gangnam and Seoul. So I was satisfied. They did offer 100,000 won less, so it was 2.3 million with housing. So yeah, it was cool that I was able to get a job within 2 weeks. I was able to transfer my visa successfully. Thank goodness that happened. So this brings me to my main tip for new teachers, which is to actually not be distracted by the booming Seoul and Korea's social life and actually really focus on your job, because that is actually so much more important, though more difficult to do. So make sure you focus on your teaching job and don't go out. Just make sure you're like uber focused on that stuff, and also don't overspend money, because that's really actually hard to do. It's really easy to spend money. So there's lots of really cute shops with clothes and with trinkets, lots of convenience stores, lots of cheap services available. So you end up spending a lot of money, which might actually be a mistake to spend that much money. In hindsight, that was a really big lesson that I learned. And save your money as much as possible, because I actually have a hunch that I'm not the only one that these Hagwons let go of that easily. So a lot of teachers don't end up fulfilling those one-year contracts. So make sure you have like that cushion money to spare for during the time when you're not working, so you're not kicked out of Korea having to go back to your own country because you don't have the money to support yourself. So in terms of transferring my visa and all the documents to my new school, thankfully I was able to do it that time. So that was really good because my school gave me this really important document called a letter of release. Now, without this letter of release, legally, you are not able to transfer a job. So if your old school decides that they don't want to give you that letter of release, then your visa actually gets revoked, and it's their choice. So they can actually send you back to your own country and you cannot teach anywhere else ever again. That's what I heard about this letter of release. So make sure, a really huge tip is to stay on good terms with your old employers all the way from the beginning all the way till the very end, because that letter of release is just that important. You must receive it in order to be able to move on to a next teaching job. So thankfully I was able to get that, but make sure you're always on good terms with your employers up until the very end. So my new place got me an office style that was one station away. I actually ended up choosing the place myself. They got me a realtor and they drove me around and showed me several places so I could actually choose from different ones. And at the time, I actually didn't like any of the choices, but I ended up choosing a spot that was kind of old, but it was pretty spacious as a loft. So it had 2 floors there, and I would sleep on the second floor of the loft. And a tip that I really want to give is that if you have a choice of where to live, always choose a place that's as close as possible to the school. So consider location first and foremost rather than the amenities there, because the bus fare and the subway fare actually ends up adding up if you use it. So you have to go there and back every day, right? So thinking about that, that's actually kind of a waste of money to get a place that's further away. When you take the bus or subway, that fare really ends up adding up to like 100 to 200,000 won each month. So make sure to consider location first and foremost, like I said, and get a place as humanly possible close to the school. So this new job was pretty excellent, and I got really close to my Korean and to my Gyopo teachers. So yeah, we spent Christmas together. It was great. It was a great bonding experience, and a lot of girls working there. And that was my first time experiencing winter in Korea, which was also amazing, though really cold. And I learned a lot from that job. And unfortunately, because of an incident that happened with a student, that school ended up letting me go on the 6-month mark. And again, this was also pretty devastating, but my recurring thought is that, hey, at least this job lasted longer than my previous one. So I've learned something. My previous job was 3 months. This one, I worked at it for 6 months. And then, yeah, so this job lasted longer than my previous one. Is another pro tip that I want to give is that you should try to keep your head down and try to actually finish that 1-year contract, even though it might be difficult. Don't quit midway, and don't make any mistakes until you finish it, just so you can receive your severance pay. So what severance pay is by Korean law, if you complete 12 months of a contract, then they give you an extra month's worth of pay. That's what severance pay is. Yeah, severance pay is a month's worth of pay that you receive once you complete a full 1-year contract by Korean law. And my suspicion is that a lot of owners and bosses, actually, in order to not pay that severance pay, they end up letting go of their employees early. So really try to keep your head down and do your absolute best and finish that year, because you get that 13th month of pay, and it's worth it. So a really big pro tip there: keep your head down and work hard until the end of the 12-month mark. So thankfully, after that experience, I was looking for a job again, and thankfully an SLP kindergarten ended up hiring me for a month while they waited for their permanent teacher to come from the States. So yeah, I was teaching there for a month, and they offered me 2.7 million with housing for that month, and this was February to March of 2018. So during that month, kind of a lot of things happened. More on that later. And yeah, that is when I came into contact with teaching kindergartners. Before, I was teaching elementary kids. But, you know, let me tell you, teaching kindergartners is really not easy. A lot of the time, they're not motivated. They don't want to learn. Well, actually, it really depends on the school. Sometimes they are really motivated, but yeah, it's just that sort of age. So at that specific school, they were not motivated. They were screaming and yelling and running around the classroom. So that was a crazy experience. But the lovely thing is, at the very end, when I was leaving, they all ran up to me and hugged me all together and said, "We love you, Mia teacher. We're gonna miss you." So that's actually kind of a lifetime memory for me that really warms my heart. So that's the beauty of teaching kindergartners, is that they do have a lot of love to give. They are super touchy feely. They're really sweet when they want to be. So yeah, that was my experience teaching at SLP for just about a month. And I ended up having a good time at that academy. It was a great memory for me, although teaching older kids is honestly kind of easier. Though the material that you teach them is more difficult in terms of behavior, teaching older kids is easier, so keep that in mind. So while I was working at that SLP, I was actually doing so many things at once. I was actually working, and I was at the same time, every weekend I was traveling from one part of Gyeonggi-do to another in order to take Korean lessons to get a resident F2 visa, which was successful, by the way. And also I was actually still working for my previous Hagwon and making school materials for them, like tests and quizzes and stuff. So I was busy doing that. And also at the same time, I was trying to find a permanent job because the SLP one was just a 1 month long. So I was looking for a permanent job, which thankfully I got. Yay! It was really awesome getting that job. It was located in Seoul and it paid 2.4 million won. So great location, okay pay. So I was ready to start off my year, and this was March of 2018. So the entire year of me working at that CDI was pretty uneventful. Things went pretty well, and everybody there, my coworkers, my boss, and they all treated me really well because I was one of the only girls there. So it was really an excellent experience. I experienced all the 4 seasons again, and I worked there for a year. So that was a really big point of growth for me because the first job lasted 3 months, the second one 6 months, and this next one I completed the entire year. So 3 months, 6 months, and a year. And another pro tip is that if you ever get fired, don't get discouraged, because it might be that your management is a little bit too strict. So that's what ended up happening to me. Here the management was more lenient, so that was really good. And they even called me back to teach CDI April, which is their younger kids program. So I'm still on good terms with that boss, which is incredibly crucial, because for the employers, I honestly have like this constant fear of, when my employers that are currently interested in me, what if they look at my resume and start contacting my previous employers, and my previous employers might have something bad to say to me. So this is yet another reason to stay on good terms with all your previous employers when you work in this industry, because those bosses might call, and then they might find out some unsavory things about you, maybe reasons why they got fired just because of some personality differences. So this tip is just yet another reason to make sure you stay on good terms with your employers, all of them. So after I completed the 1-year contract with that school, the contract was from March 2018 to March 2019. I actually decided to transition into a different industry. I wanted to try my hand in a different field. So what I did was, I got, the Korean classes that I took, I was able to get that visa, that resident visa that allowed me to work other jobs. And thanks to that, I transitioned into the plastic surgery industry, the medical field. So I was working there from March 2018 until August of 2018. And I'll actually make a separate video about all the jobs that I worked that were not teaching, but the only way you're able to do that is by transitioning from the E2 visa onto a resident visa, which in my case, that was the F2. And, I highly recommend that you get this visa because it allows you to work any job in Korea, not just a teaching job. And you're also not dependent on your academy. So in September of 2019, I actually came back into the teaching industry because I received an excellent offer from a school in Taechidong. I wasn't planning of coming back into teaching, but then the offer was just too great to refuse. I was interviewing, and then this school ended up offering me 4.2 million, and they also actually raised my salary later on down the road. But yeah, and it was actually 4.2 million for 4 days of work, so I wouldn't be working on Wednesdays. Now, that is pretty amazing. That's actually the best job that I've ever heard of. And to this day, it might be, yeah, it is one of the best jobs that I've ever worked. It was a pretty amazing experience. And I'm honestly so glad that I worked there and so thankful that I did. By the way, I worked there for 2 years and 3 months. So I worked there for a really long time, and this job ended up getting me through the COVID times because we ended up teaching online through Zoom for the majority of the year. So I was actually not as affected by COVID and by the layoffs that other people were, like during this global pandemic. So yeah, what a great and what an amazing experience and opportunity that I had at that school. 4.2 million, this is without housing, but still, this is such a high salary. And by my second year, they raised my salary to 4.4 million. Now, the downside of that is that I actually had to pay a lot of taxes on that job. I ended up paying like an incredible amount of taxes, really terrible, but maybe I'll speak about that in a different video. But yeah, that is my experience, and I worked there from September of 2019 to December of 2021. To this day, actually, I have not found a job that offers that much money for 4 days of work. It was pretty incredible, but being the stupid girl that I am, I ended up leaving that job. It was kind of a mistake and a blessing at the same time because I found a job that was even more amazing, though it required a lot more work, but still, yeah, it was crazy. I ended up leaving that job, but I shouldn't have done that. I actually kind of regret doing that, but also if I didn't, I wouldn't have been able to experience my next job. My next job was actually not a teaching job, and it was such an incredible experience working there. Now, that one was really amazing. I worked there from January of 2002 to 2022 till October of 2022, and it was a job in the entertainment field. So the Korean entertainment field is just too incredible to even begin to describe, which I'll make a separate video about that. And I was a casting manager there, so I would cast people for Korean dramas, for movies, for music videos. So yeah, that was pretty amazing, but I ended up quitting that job in October of 2022, and I moved back to the States. Being back in the States, I moved back in January of 2023. I actually got into a sort of a depression over the next few months while I was living in the States because I was missing Korea so much. The life in these two different countries is just so different. There are no, like, all of the amazing things that Korea has. The United States does not have them, so I was in a depression. I was wanting to go back, so several months go by, and I actually just grab a ticket and I take off, and I actually flew straight to Korea, and this was September of 2023. And then once I arrived there, I was literally on the benches of ICN airport when I realized, oh wait, I don't have a house. I'm practically homeless in this country. What am I going to do, and where am I going to go? And so I just got on my phone right on these benches, and I started applying for jobs. I went onto Seoul Craigslist and I was applying for jobs like absolutely crazy. And thankfully, I was connected to a super competent recruiter that connected me to an academy straight away. I interviewed with them through FaceTime on my phone, and this academy owner lived in Incheon, so he ended up picking me up basically on the same day of me arriving to Korea. So thankfully I didn't have to be like homeless there at ICN airport. He picked me up, he took me to the academy, I signed the contract, and he got me an Airbnb while I was waiting for the other teacher to leave to take over their office still. So yeah, that was a really crazy and cool experience, me just practically being homeless there on the benches of Incheon airport trying to find a job desperately because I had nowhere to go, and then me getting a job like literally on the same day by a person that lives in Incheon to like pick me up in his car, and he treated me so well after that. So that was pretty amazing, and yeah, and kind of a lifetime memory too by how lucky I got. So that was pretty incredible. So that was a kindergarten and it paid 2.7 million with housing, pretty good pay, and not as much as my previous academy, but you know, I had to make do with with what I got, especially since he saved me from that, you know, atrocious situation. And I ended up working at that school for about 6 months because the owner changed and he ended up laying off more than half of his staff, Korean and foreign teachers alike. So I did not complete the full year contract. I was there for 6 months and here I was again. This was, you know, February of 2024, and now I'm trying to find another teaching position. And then in February 2024, I found a job called MI at a school called MI, and this was in Seoul, and they paid me 3.0 million with housing, and I was working there for just about 2 months, and after that I had to find yet another job. The next job was actually right across the street from my other academy, the SLP one. So yeah, it was right across the street from my old academy, and I was recommended there by my old co-worker. It paid about 2.85 million won, and I was also there for only a few months from I would say April of 2024 up until August of 2024, and then I lost the housing from that school like really suddenly. So it was like I lost that in a matter of days, and I actually ended up getting another place in Shilin there for about a month while I was looking for another job. Pretty crazy experience. I had to take care of my dogs while I was doing that, so I was a dog mommy during that time, and that time it took me a month to find a job, and I found one actually in September. And we come to my last teaching job, which was from October to November of 2024. That job paid about 2.8 million with housing. There was actually a visa issue, so they decided to not proceed with my position. So yeah, that was my last teaching job, and after that I moved back to the States. So now I'm back in the States, as you guys can see, and I'm ready to undertake my next teaching journey in South Korea. I was interviewing and I actually got a position, yay! So, and I'm going to be going to Korea next month, and thankfully I'm going to be filming videos from South Korea about South Korea. So that's actually really going to be great. And America kind of depresses me too much with their lack of affordable transportation, lack of available jobs, and just lack of a lot of amenities that South Korea does possess. So I'm really excited to go back and, you know, undertake my Korea journey one more time. And as I said, that one starts August of 2025. So be on the lookout for more Korea videos as I'm in the country. So thank you guys so much for watching my video all the way till the very end. That's going to be it. Let me know in the comments if you have more questions about teaching in Korea, if there are things that you guys are curious about teaching in South Korea or about life in Korea in general. I'll answer everything. And other than that, thank you so much again, and see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.